The first thing is that it was established under the Constitution, and it's mandated by law to carry out, I would say, about 4 tasks: the registration of electors, holding of elections, delimitation of boundaries, and maintaining a jury list. With respect to the registration of voters, that is something that is carried out throughout the year, even between elections. In Trinidad and Tobago, we maintain what we would call a permanent list. It's a system of permanent, continuous registration. So throughout the year, throughout the period, we register persons. And that is what people know us for quite a bit, actually, and that's the question of the ID card.
The commission constitutes 5 members, of which one is the chairman. The department, however, is a public service department headed by the chief election officer, myself. And as head of department, my role is both operational and, to a certain extent, the development of policy. So in relation to example, for this election, I would have developed a policy document that the board examined to determine how we would conduct elections in this pandemic environment. The Elections and Boundaries Commission is ready. The department is ready. We have been monitoring the election environment for some time now. We looked at what other countries have been doing in relation to the pandemic. A few of them chose to postpone, but many did go ahead and conduct their polls. And so we have examined what I would refer to as international best practice in how to conduct an election in a pandemic situation. Having done that, we've developed a policy document. It took us quite some time to conduct research in that regard, and we worked with international election management bodies or associations, for example, the Commonwealth Electoral Network, in coming up with our ideas as to how to conduct the poll. Having developed that policy document, we then submitted it to the Ministry of Health. So we have been working very closely with the Ministry of Health to develop what we would call COVID-19 protocols for the conduct of the parliamentary election.
The Ministry of Health then looked at it. They did also their own research, and they came back with a revised draft of these guidelines. But we didn't stop there. We then went on and had a mock station set up, in which we had voters walking through, looking at the process, and the Ministry of Health sent personnel and they looked at it also. The ministry then further revised the guidelines. These further revised guidelines were then sent back to us. We again looked at it, made comments, again further revised those guidelines. It's been a long process. It's not a one-off. We just came up with these guidelines. There was a process involved.
Well, the protocols themselves have only recently been finalized by the Ministry of Health. Both the organization and the Ministry of Health wanted to be sure about the state of the coronavirus in the country before releasing the protocols. And so we are ready now to educate the public on what is required of them on poll day come 10th August. We have 2 responsibilities. First, to protect the poll day staff. Our poll day staff will be required to wear masks, to sanitize the polling station periodically, as well as to sanitize certain implements in the polling station. So, for example, that pen that you may use to sign your poll card, or the X stamp that each elector would be required to use to place the X on the ballot paper, those implements will be sanitized. So each elector would be receiving a freshly sanitized X stamp to utilize. So we are asking the electorate firstly to wear a mask. You would be required to, while you are in the line waiting to enter the polling station, physical distance. So you'll be asked to stand 6 feet apart in the line. So of course we know there's that concern that the lines would be long. Well, of course the distancing requirement will indeed cause lines to be somewhat longer than we are accustomed. Upon entry into the polling station, we have a clerk designated to offer you hand sanitizer. Then move along to the red line or green line poll clerk, as the case may be, where you would be asked to just pull down your mask so that we can verify your identification with that of either your ID card or your photo in the registration record binder in the polling station. You'll be then moving along now to the deputy presiding officer, who would be showing you a guidance ballot, how you would vote and also providing you with that X stamp, that cleansed X stamp that you'll be taking into the voting booth. So that's a little different as well, because normally the X stamps are already in the booth, but this time you'd be given the X stamp by the deputy presiding officer. So you take that X stamp now with your ballot and into the voting booth and place the X on the candidate of your choice. You then move along to the ballot box, poll clerk, where you would be placing that X stamp in a receptacle for used X stamps, and then of course putting your ballot into the ballot box as well as dipping your finger in the ink. Now I know that the ink is of some concern. I've heard the conversation about the ink. So let me give you the assurance that one, the receptacle that the ink is being held in is going to be periodically sanitized. But also the Ministry of Health has indicated that having sanitized upon entry into the polling station, an elector should not be concerned about dipping his or her finger into the ink. And of course, you as an elector have the option to sanitize immediately thereafter, having left the station. So that they're really, based on all these protocols, there's no concern about spreading the COVID-19 virus, having exercised your franchise.
There's also one additional issue, and that is that what we did with this election is we went out to all the returning officers and we told them to look at their polling stations and see if the polling stations were large enough to allow for proper physical distancing. They came back with a number of recommended changes to move to other premises or facilities which they think were better able to accommodate proper spacing. So what that means is that some of the polling stations electors would have used in the last election, they won't be able to use in this election. So the importance then of the poll card. When we send out the poll card to persons, open it, because in that poll card we'll have the address of your polling station. So it's critical.
The Elections and Boundaries Commission has spent a lot of time developing COVID-19 protocols for the conduct of the election that will ensure that the poll day staff and the electorate would be safe. So we ask you to come out and exercise your franchise for the political party or candidate of your choice, knowing that every effort has been made to ensure your safety and prevent the spread of the COVID-19 virus.
A message from the Elections and Boundaries Commission.